1,500 million followers of Muhammad totally believe that he was the most perfect male being ever created. Modest, compassionate, just, loving, merciful, moral, knowledgeable, brave, faithful, righteous, generous, truthful, and last but not least, sinless. By the way, these are also the attributes of Allah, the God of Muhammad and his followers. The question that must be asked by believers as well as unbelievers is, was Muhammad a paragon of virtue, worthy of being emulated by billions in the world? So as not to be accused of so-called Islamophobia or being anti-Muslims, I am basing this chapter on what one of the most renowned exegetes of Islam considers the attributes of a true prophet are. According to Taqi-d-Din Ahmad bin Taymiyyah, one of the great scholars of Islam, there were many false prophets, such as Musaylimah the liar, a contemporary of Muhammad. Taymiyyah concluded that many of these alleged prophets were in fact possessed, and that the only way to determine the authenticity of any prophet is by examining his seerah, that is, his biography and deeds, and find out if he be found worthy of the attribute. Ibn Kathir and other scholars of Islam assert that Muhammad was the noblest of all humanity and the greatest of prophets. Muhammad's Quran agrees. Al-Qalam 68.4. And thou, Muhammad, art an exalted standard of character. What I am about to reveal to you, ladies and gentlemen, regarding Muhammad's morality, based entirely upon the Arabic Islamic exegetical sources, are items that are so obscene, shameful, utterly disgusting and degenerate, that neither believers nor unbelievers would have accepted as true had I not based them entirely upon the authentic Islamic sources in chapter and verse. All those listening who may be in shock, incredulity, outrage and or revulsion, calm down. Double check my sources, and only if you find error or deliberate falsehood should you then have the right to take me to task. Al-Ahzab 33.50. O Prophet, we have made lawful to thee thy wives to whom thou hast paid their dowers, and those whom thy right hand possesses, out of the prisoners of war whom Allah has assigned to thee. And any believing woman who dedicates her soul to the Prophet, if the Prophet wishes to wed her, this only for thee, and not for the believers at large. In this verse, Allah, the God of Muhammad, allows only Muhammad to have as many wives and sex partners as he wants, while the same Allah limits them to 4 wives to all other male believers. Sahih al-Bukhari 7.760, narrated by Sahil. A woman came to the Prophet and said, I have come to present myself to you. Since Muhammad claimed to be the Prophet of Allah, he was in his time like the modern superstars who get the attention of thousands of females. As a superstar messenger of Allah, women wanted to be intimately associated with him and of course with his power. Then as now, they offered sex in return for a one-night stand with their idol. Muhammad, being Muhammad, had sex with as many of them as he desired. The next story is about Muhammad lusting after the young beautiful Zainab, the wife of his own adopted son Zayd bin Haritha. I shall abridge the story for brevity. The History of Al-Tabari, The Victory of Islam, Volume 8, page 23. The Messenger of Allah went to the house of Zayd bin Haritha unexpectedly and was received by his wife Zainab. She was scantily dressed only in a shift. She jumped up in haste and excited the admiration of the Messenger of Allah, so that he turned away, murmuring something that could scarcely be understood. However, he did say overtly, Glory be to Allah the Almighty. Glory be to Allah, who causes the hearts to turn. When Zayd came home, Zainab told him everything. So Zayd went to the Messenger of Allah and said, Messenger of Allah, perhaps Zainab has excited your admiration, and so I will separate myself from her. Zayd could find no possible way to approach her after that day. He eventually separated from her and left her, and she became free. One day, while the Messenger of Allah was talking with Aisha, a fainting became over him. When he was released from it, he smiled and said, "Who will go to Zainab to tell her the good news, saying that Allah has married her to me?" Then he recited this very convenient revelation from Allah, sanctifying his lust and immorality. Al-Ahzab 33.37. Behold, thou didst say to one who had received grace from Allah and thy favor, retain thou in wedlock thy wife and fear Allah. But thou didst hide in thy heart that which Allah was about to make manifest. Thou didst fear the people, but it is more fitting that thou should fear Allah. Then, when Zayd had dissolved his marriage with her, with the necessary formality, we joined her in marriage to thee, in order that in future there may be no difficulty to the believers in the matter of marriage with the wives of their adopted sons, when the latter have dissolved with the necessary formality their marriage to them. And Allah's command must be fulfilled. In confirmation of this sordid story, Zainab asserted the following in Sahih al-Bukhari 9.516, narrated by Anas. Zainab used to boast before the wives of the Prophet, "You were given in marriage by your families, while I was married to the Prophet by Allah from over 7 heavens." Muhammad, the alleged paragon of virtue, changed one of the most important traditions of the pagan Arabs regarding adoptions, with his usual made-to-order revelation, just so that he can have sex with the adopted son's wife. At the same time, he destroyed forever the ability to adopt any child in Islam in the proper manner. Al-Baqarah 2:222. They ask you concerning menstruation, say it is a hurt, therefore keep away from them women during their menstruation, and do not go unto them until they have become clean. And when they have cleansed, then go into them, as Allah has ordained for you. The Quran, in very clear Arabic, forbids men and husbands from making contact, let alone having sex, with menstruating women. Sahih al-Bukhari 1.319, narrated by Zainab bint Abi Salama. Salama said, "I got my menses while I was lying with the Prophet under a woolen sheet. So I slipped away, took the clothes for menses, and put them on. Allah's Apostle said, 'Have you got your menses?' I replied, 'Yes.' Then he called me and took me with him under the woolen sheet." Salama further said, "The Prophet used to kiss me while he was fasting." Sahih al-Bukhari 1.298, narrated by Aisha. During the menses, the Prophet used to order me to put on an izar, a dress worn below the waist, and used to fondle me. While in i'tikaf, he used to bring his head near me, and I would wash it while I used to be in my periods, menses. Sahih al-Bukhari 1.300, narrated by Maimuna. Whenever Allah's Apostle wanted to fondle any of his wives during their periods, he used to ask her to wear an izar, dress worn below the waist. Sahih al-Bukhari 1.299, narrated by Abdul Rahman bin al-Aswad, on the authority of his father. Aisha said, whenever Allah's Apostle wanted to fondle any one of us during her periods of menses, he used to order her to put on an izar and start fondling her. Sahih al-Bukhari 9.639, narrated by Aisha. The Prophet used to recite the Quran with his head in my lap while I used to be in my periods, having menses. I have deliberately quoted from several of Muhammad's wives so that no one can accuse me of being selective. Muhammad, the presumed Prophet of Allah, the virtuous, broke the very rules that his Lord Allah allegedly instructed him in the Quran, while he sent to Allah's hell any of his followers who did. I would like any of the followers of Muhammad listening to explain away the above hadiths as bequeathed to humanity not by Christian evangelists, Zionists, Jews or Hindus, but by the highest Muslim reporters. I shall now share with you one story revealing Muhammad's faithlessness towards his wives. The History of Al-Tabari, The Victory of Islam, Volume 8, page 223. It is reported that the Prophet had divided his days among his wives, And when it was the turn of Hafsa, he sent her for an errand to the house of her father Umar al-Khattab. When she took this order and went, the Prophet called his slave girl Maria the Copt, who was a gift from the king Najashi, and had sexual intercourse with her. Hafsa did not find her father and returned quickly, catching Muhammad with the slave girl on the former's bed. Muhammad quickly evicted the slave girl and told Hafsa that if she kept this between them, he would henceforth refrain from the slave girl. Hafsa was not mollified and told all the other wives about what happened. Dear listeners, we must empathize with Hafsa and the other wives who revolted against Muhammad's incessant philandering. After all, it was Hafsa's day with Muhammad, but he lied to her by sending her on a false errand and deliberately betrayed and dishonored her by having sex with Maria. As usual with Muhammad, whenever he needed to justify any and all of his nefarious deeds, he dropped on them another made-to-order revelation. Surah Al-Tahrim 66, 1-11, wherein his ever-ready accomplice Allah not only sanctifies Muhammad's infidelity, but adding insult to injury, threatens the victimized wives with either being divorced by Muhammad and or the torments of hell. Allah, in fact, chastises Muhammad for trying to please his wives by promising them not to sleep with Maria anymore. Instead of these drastic measures, the compassionate Muhammad deprived all his wives from having sex with him for a month, while he had the time of his life uninterrupted with the young and beautiful Maria, who eventually bore him a son, Ibrahim. Let me bluntly ask the believing female listeners how any of you would react if your husband or boyfriend asked you to go on an errand and then you return before your time only to find him in bed with another woman. In all honesty, what sort of man would that make him in your eyes? Worse still, if he is your prophet, whom you extol as the most perfect human, to be slavishly emulated? Remarkably, even Aisha, the teenager of 1400 years ago, was able to figure out the following fact and reality that have escaped the intellect of hundreds of millions of male followers of Muhammad by pointing out, verily your Lord Allah is ever quick to fulfill your whims and desires. Al-Suyuti, Volume 6, page 629. Whenever such verses were revealed rescuing Muhammad. There are many more such sordid stories to recite, but I believe that the above are enough to ask. Is Muhammad really the best male ever created?